Mars as we go through the remaining hours. Right now, let's cross to the virtual Munich Security Conference, where the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is just about to make his address to other leaders there.
Threats that we all face. The starting point of our integrated review of foreign, defence and development policy, which will be published next month, is that the success of global Britain depends on the security of our homeland and the stability of the Euro-Atlantic area. If climate change and pandemics are silent and insidious threats, hostile states may seek to harm our people in more direct and obvious ways, as the Russian state did with reckless abandon in Salisbury 3 years ago, only to collide with the implacable, immovable rock of transatlantic solidarity, sanctions, and coordinated diplomatic expulsions. An outstanding act of collective security for which, once again, I thank our friends. If we are to assure our safety, our democracies need to strengthen their capabilities to meet the rigours of an ever more competitive world. And it's precisely for that reason that we can keep our people safe, by fulfilling our obligations to NATO and enhancing the UK's global influence. That's the reason I've decided to bolster our armed forces with the biggest increase in our defence budget since the Cold War. The UK's defence spending will rise by £24 billion over the next 4 years, comfortably exceeding the NATO pledge to invest 2% of GDP, and ensuring that we retain the biggest defence budget in Europe and the second largest in NATO after the United States. We will focus our investment on the new technologies that will revolutionise warfare, artificial intelligence, unmanned aircraft, directed energy weapons and many others, so that we stand alongside our allies to deter any adversary and preserve the peace. This year, the Royal Navy's new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, will embark on her maiden deployment, sailing 20,000 nautical miles to the Indo-Pacific and back. On her flight deck will be a squadron of F-35 jets from the US Marine Corps. Among her escorts will be an American destroyer, showing how the British, American and European armed forces can operate hand in glove anywhere in the world. But investing in new capabilities is not an end in itself. The purpose of the military instrument is to strengthen diplomacy and therefore maximise the chances of a success. We do not wish to live in a world of unchecked rivalry or decoupling or obstacles to sensible cooperation and global economic growth. Nor are we concerned solely with trade. I hope the UK has shown by our actions that we will defend our values as well as our interests. For the first time in nearly 50 years, we now have the power to impose independent national sanctions, allowing the UK to act swiftly and robustly. Our first decision was to create a Magnitsky regime designed to punish human rights offenders. The UK then became the first European country to sanction senior figures in Belarus after the stolen election. We've now imposed sanctions on over 50 human rights violators, including from Russia, Myanmar and Zimbabwe. We have consistently spoken out against China's repression of the Uyghur people in Xinjiang province and will continue to do so. We've introduced new measures to ensure that the supply chains of UK companies are not tainted by the violations in Xinjiang. After China broke a treaty and imposed a repressive national security law on Hong Kong, the UK offered nearly 3 million of the territory's people a route to British citizenship. We acted quickly and willingly, with cross-party support at home, to keep faith with the people of Hong Kong. Now that we've left the EU, Parliament has a greater say over foreign policy, and this has only reinforced our national determination to be a force for good in the world. Britain is working alongside France, Germany and the United States in a transatlantic quad to address the most pressing security issues, including Iran. And I sense a new resolve among our European friends and allies to come together and act again with unity and determination. And we witnessed that spirit after the attempted murder of Alexei Navalny as he recovered in a hospital bed in Berlin. While NATO was being written off in some places, the supertanker of European defence spending was quietly beginning to turn. And while this delicate high seas manoeuvre is far from complete, and the vessel needs to alter course, frankly, a good deal more, the fact is that NATO defence spending, excluding the United States, has risen by $190 billion since the Wales summit in 2014. When our allies on the eastern flank sought reassurance about their security, NATO responded by deploying a multinational force in Poland and the Baltic states. And the UK was proud to make the biggest single contribution, leading the battle group in Estonia, showing that we mean it when we say that our commitment to European security is unconditional and immovable. I believe that Europe increasingly recognizes the necessity of joining our American friends to rediscover that far-sighted leadership and the spirit of adventure and transatlantic unity that made our two continents great in the first place. A new world is rising up around us. Patterns of trade and commerce are changing. The global center of gravity is moving eastwards. The technological revolution proceeds with blistering speed. But none of us should fear or resent these changes. Free societies are united by their faith in liberal democracy, the rule of law, and free markets, which surely comprise the great trinity of human progress. Free countries, many of them located far beyond the geographical West, by the way, possess a boundless and inherent ability to release the talents and enterprise of their people to master and adapt to change. It is no coincidence that of the 10 most innovative nations in the world, as ranked by the Global Innovation Index in 2020, all but one are liberal democracies. There is no reason why our countries should not be stronger and safer in 2030 or indeed 2050 than today, provided we share the burden, compete successfully, and seek out friends and partners wherever they may be found. So I've invited South Korea and Australia and India to attend the next G7 summit as guests alongside leading international organizations. So let's resist any temptation to bemoan the changes around us. Let's build a coalition for openness and innovation, reaching beyond established alliances and the confines of geography. Proud of our history, but free of any temptation to turn back the clock, and harnessing the genius of open societies to flourish in an era of renewed competition. Let's respectfully dispel the air of pessimism that has sometimes attended our conferences. America and Europe, side by side, have the ability to prove once again the innate advantages of free nations and to succeed in forging our own destiny. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, thank you so much.
Well, that was Boris Johnson's address to the Munich Security Conference. Listening to it, Sky's diplomatic editor Dominic Waghorn, who joins us from Winchester. Just at the end there, Dominic, interesting that he's invited South Korea, India to the next conference as observers of the G7, which I suppose points to how concerned he might be about China, along with the US. But busy day for Boris Johnson, G7, Munich Security Conference. Has it been a successful one in terms of international diplomacy?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting speech, wasn't it? It was really a reaffirmation of faith of belief in the Western alliance and the idea of a rules-based international multilateral world order system. And he acknowledged that the centre of gravity in many ways in the world, economically and politically, geopolitically, is shifting inexorably eastwards. But he insisted that the qualities and the assets and beliefs in things like liberal markets, liberal democracy, free markets and rule of law were still beacons for countries around the world to be gravitating towards. This is a very important day for Boris Johnson because it is the beginning of an important year for the British government. The G7 summit or meeting in June in Cornwall is something that Boris Johnson believes will be an opportunity for him to kind of prove Britain's relevance and influence on the world stage, particularly after Brexit. It's not just G7, it's also COP26, the UN climate change conference in November as well. So it's a crucially important year for Britain and for Boris Johnson's government. And he's used today to try and reinforce this idea that Britain will be a steward for the international world order and international system that he wants to see flourish again. And ministers, and we've been sort of briefed this week, have this belief that there's a kind of renewed sense of urgency, but also energy and unity amongst allies towards reinforcing and strengthening that system. I mean, we are coming towards the end of, or we have come to the end of a period of a few years that have sort of seen mind, not least because the previous American President Donald Trump didn't seem to believe in organizations like G7 or the world order and the multilateral world rules-based system, but also because the stresses and strains put on it by COVID. So Britain sees it's an opportunity to strengthen the world order, but also to put the UK back at the forefront of that system, and also to try and, I think, to reassure allies that Britain still has a relevance and an influence despite Brexit and despite the other challenges facing the world.
Thanks, Dominic. You're watching the News Era. Coming up next, 10 of the best.